Hi, I'm Stephen Carson coming at you from St. Louis, Missouri, in these United States. Going to continue the series on class from the book Class by Paul Fussell. I think uh, well, it evokes a lot of reactions. Let's put it that way. As I read it, and I think as other people hear this content, I'll get to that in a moment. What do I want to say? No show next week. I'm busy with something at work. Um, I was busy last week with work as well. That should be settling down, hopefully. And then support for the show is gratefully received at Subscribestar. Link in the video description on YouTube if you're on Twitter and watching on Twitter. It is available on Twitter, by the way. If there are other places I can stream to from Restream that would be useful to you, let me know. Unfortunately, it doesn't stream to, was I just getting a request for? Odyssey? It doesn't stream to Odyssey, I don't think. Anyway, um, happy to try to support more platforms. It's just another checkbox, basically, on Restream, so easy enough to do. Anyway, let's get right to it. I think that this material can be a little, could be challenging for some people. As you read through it, you're like, haha, he's talking about class. That's interesting, you know. And then you start seeing yourself in some of the things he's saying, and you start feeling defensive, you know, and self-conscious because he's taking a pretty neutral stance. He's not like these classes are good and these classes are bad. Um, he kind of, but he kind of pokes fun at everyone, and it can dig in there a little bit. The knife digs in a little. So I actually wanted to start with something to kind of I'm going to start and if I can remember, end with it as well. Uh, Here we go. Here's my slides. So I'd like to start with something St. Paul wrote, because as I'm reading this book and I'm feeling the tension of the middle class wants to pretend to be more upper class than it is, and all this jockeying for position as you read about this stuff, it made me think of this passage from Paul. He wrote, I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So I just thought, it's interesting and helps you observe what's around you to learn about this stuff. But I think if it were to make you feel, less satisfied, less content with where the Lord has placed you, then it would be bad. It would be damaging, and I don't want that. So anyway, I'll try to end with this as well. I'll try to remember that. So in the first episode of this, I've got a playlist in the video description now, which includes the one that Black Horse and I did on sort of the economic aspects of moving up and down class. I introduced Fussell's categories here. I'll go over them very briefly because he's going to be referring to these throughout the text, and I'll just leave them on the screen as a guide. So at the top, you have the top out of sight. These are people who you don't really see because you can't see their houses from the road. They're way back there, right? Maybe behind a gate or something. They don't tend to cavort around in public. They are put a premium on privacy. That's something that, as we talked about last time, actually changed. This uppermost level used to kind of flaunt its wealth, and for various reasons, they've found that they need to kind of hide. So that's the top out of sight, and then you have the upper class, the upper middle class. Then you get into the regular middle class, and then he divides the proletarians into three levels: the high proletarian, the mid proletarian, and low proletarian. He gets into fine distinctions of those. We won't so much today. And then finally at the bottom you have the destitute, the really poor, and the bottom out of sight. The bottom out of sight are like the top out of sight, are kind of invisible. They're maybe in institutions, they're in prisons, they are not people you're bumping into in the normal course of your life. Okay, so that's his schema for all this. We're going to cover, I'm short on time, but I would like to, I'll just kind of skip some stuff. I hope basically what this does is it makes you want to read the book. That's part of the purpose of this series, because it's not a long book. It's less than 200 pages, and I find it absolutely delightful, just full of amazing details, historical and literary references I'd never seen before. Just, I don't know, just a fresh perspective on a lot of things that I'm really enjoying. So I'm going to try to cover 3 chapters. One talks about appearance. One talks about how various classes keep their home. And finally, there's a chapter that's lengthy on how the different classes drink alcohol, how they eat, how they play, and how they purchase their consumption habits. Okay, so he says, how is it that if you're sharp, you're generally able to estimate a person's class at a glance? What caste marks do you look for? Good looks, he says, distributed pretty freely, but frequently a mark of high caste. Prudent natural selection is the reason, or as some people like to talk about, positive eugenics, I guess it's called. You know, selecting who your children marry, right? If upper class people marry downward, they tend to choose beauty only. In general, good-looking people marry up, and the insecure and ugly tend to marry down. Smiling is a class indicator, that is, not doing a lot of it. On the street, you'll notice that prole, he says prole, short for proletarian, prole women smile more and smile wider than those of the middle and upper classes. Sheer height is a more trustworthy sign of class in England than everywhere, but classy people are seldom short and squat, even in the US. Regardless of one's height, having an ass that protrudes is low class, as is having or appearing to have very little neck. He says the absence of neck is notable in Lawrence Welk, country and western singers like Johnny Cash and similar proles. Because 62% of Americans are overweight, a figure that's probably sadly out of date and is quite worse by now. Because 62% of Americans are overweight, a cheap way to achieve a sort of distinction is to be thin. Realized I don't have the chat where I can see it. Okay, here we go. Oh, that's what I was saying. Why I was saying ads? I'm not signed in. Excuse me, just a moment. I usually want to participate in the chat, and I was not signed in for some reason. Okay, there we go. Yeah, cheap way to achieve this sort of distinction is being thin. It's the 3 prole classes, high, mid, low, that get fat. Fast food and beer are 2 of the causes. But anxiety about slipping down a rung, resulting in nervous overeating, plays its part also, especially among high proletarians. Flaunting obesity is a prole sign, as if the object were to offer maximum aesthetic offense to the higher classes and thus exact a form of revenge. I think he often is very, very funny in this book. So I'm going to be laughing a lot. Sorry. Let's see. Let's see. States settled before 1776 would register least in the way of fatty tissue. Girth would generally increase from east to west and from south to north. It increases as you go north. Interesting. The flab capital of the USA should be located somewhere in the triangle of Minnesota, Iowa, and the Dakotas. There's other things we can look for an elite look. It requires women to be thin with a hairstyle dating back 18 or 20 years or so. The classiest women wear their hair for a lifetime in exactly the style they affected in college. These high-class women wear superbly fitting dresses and expensive but always understated shoes and handbags with very little jewelry. Now, certain details are going to be a little bit out of date, but because fashion changes, right? But they wear scarves. Men should be thin, no jewelry at all, no cigarette case, moderate length hair, never dyed or tinted, which is a middle class or high prole sign, as the practice of President Reagan indicates. Never a hairpiece, that's a prole thing. Both women's and men's elite looks are achieved by a process of rejection of the current, the showy, the superfluous. Okay, so that's why he's talking about like the woman's hairstyle being sort of intentionally out of date. She feels no need to keep up with the latest thing. Okay, and then a lot of details. I'm not sure how if I'm gonna go through all of these. He even gets into color, which colors indicate class. Navy is the upper middle class color. Purple is the prole equivalent, at least back then. This is good. The purple polyester pantsuit offends two principles that determine class in clothes: the color principle and the organic materials principle. Navy blue aside, colors are classier the more pastel or faded, and materials are classier the more they consist of anything that was once alive. That means wool, leather, silk, cotton, and fur only. All synthetic fibers are proletarian. Sorry, I'm realizing I can't see my volume, just to make sure nothing goes wrong there. Okay. It's hard to be the tech for the show and run the show. Yeah, so all synthetic fibers are proletarian, partly because they're cheaper than natural ones, partly because they're not archaic. We'll talk more about archaicism as a class indicator, and partly because they're entirely uniform and hence boring. You'll never find a bit of straw or sheep excrement woven into an acrylic sweater. The organic principle also determines that in kitchens, wood is classier than formica, and on the kitchen table, a cotton cloth is higher than plastic or oilcloth. So important for genuine upper middle class standing is the total renunciation of artificial fibers that the elite eye becomes skilled in detecting, even as the official preppy handbook has it, a small percentage of polyester in an Oxford cloth shirt, a sad middle caste mark. The same invaluable book praises young Caroline Kennedy unreservedly. On technical points, preppier than Mummy, because during 4 years at Harvard Square, an unnatural fiber never went near her body. Great line. Anyway, okay. If you can gauge people's proximity to prole status by the color and polyester content of their garments, legibility of their dress is another sign. Legible clothing is Alison Leary's useful term to designate things like t-shirts or caps with messages on them you're supposed to read and admire. The messages may be simple, like Budweiser or Heineken's, or they may be complex and often lewd, like the one on the girl's t-shirt, "The best part is inside." When proles assemble to enjoy leisure, they seldom appear in clothing without words on it. As you move up the classes and the understatement principle begins to operate, the words gradually disappear, to be replaced in the middle and upper middle classes by mere emblems like the Lacoste alligator. Once ascending further, you've left all such trademarks behind. You may correctly infer that you are entering the purlieus of the upper class itself. And he goes into psychological reasons why proles feel a need to wear legible clothing, but I'll leave that for you to dig into. Can't cover everything here. The wearing of clothes, either excessively new or excessively neat and clean, also suggests that your social circumstances are not entirely secure. The upper and upper middle classes like to appear in old clothes, as if to advertise how much of conventional dignity they can afford to throw away. This reminded me, by the way, we had two black guys live at our house when I was a teenager. My parents in the ministry often took people in. Many people lived at our house over the years. But anyway, these two black guys lived with us. One of them was from our neighborhood, which is, I don't know, lower middle class or something. The other was literally from the ghetto. And the one from the ghetto, when we were up early to get ready to go to school together, he would be ironing his jeans, which just blew my mind. He had to get that crease in them jeans, you know? um, I don't know that they do that anymore, but that's what he did back then. Really illustrates this. Douglas Sutherland in The English Gentleman is sound on the old clothes principle. Gentlemen, he writes, may wear their suits until they are threadbare, but they do so with considerable panache, and it is evident to the most uncritical eye that they have been built by a good tailor. On the other hand, the middle class and the proles make much of new clothes, of course with the highest possible polyester content. The question of the class meaning of cleanliness is a tricky one, not as easy perhaps as Alison Lurie thinks. She finds cleanliness a sign of status, since to be clean and neat always involves the expense of time and money. But laboring to present yourself scrupulously clean and neat suggests that you're worried about status slippage, and that you care terribly what your audience thinks, both low signs. The perfect shirt collar, the too neatly tied necktie knot, the anxious overattention at dry cleaning, all betray the wimp or the nasty nice. The deployment of the male bow tie is an illustration. If neatly tied, centered, and balanced, the effect is middle class. When tied askew, as if carelessly or incompetently, the effect is upper middle, or even if sufficiently inept, upper. You can see how this might affect me, right? As I read this and I go, am I being too careful to tie my tie? Just so, you know, betraying my insecurity of not being middle class or whatever. Anyway, you can drive yourself crazy with this stuff. The worst thing is being neat when socially you're supposed to be sloppy, or clean when you're supposed to be filthy. There's an analogy here with the excessively washed and polished automobile, almost infallibly a sign of prole ownership. Class people can afford to drive dirty cars. Just as walking on the street, they're more likely to carry their business papers in tatty, expanding files made of reddish-brown fiber, now fuzzy and sweat-stained, rather than in neat-looking attaché cases displaying lots of leather and brass, items that are a sad stigma of the middle class. I'm guilty of that. This principle of not too neat is crucial in men's clothing. Too careful means low, at least middle class, perhaps even prole. Dear boy, you're almost too well dressed to be a gentleman. Neil Mackwood imagines an upper class person addressing someone in the middle class. The difference between high versus low caste effects in men's clothes is partly the result of the upper orders being used to wearing suits, or at least jackets. So okay, let's see. Okay, that was of particular interest to me. I'm not going to read that. Okay. All right. So clothes with a glossy middle class as opposed to a matte upper middle class finish. Middle class clothes tend to err by excessive smoothness, to glitter a bit, to shine even before they're worn. Upper middle clothes, on the other hand, lean to the soft, textured, woolly, nubby. Ultimately, the difference implies a difference between city and country, or labor and leisure, where country betokens not decrepit dairy farms and bad schools, but estates and horse leisure. Thus, the popularity among the upper middle class of the tweed jacket. Country leisure is what it implies, not daily wage slavery in the city. Okay, I may skip through because I just can't cover everything. I'll do a few more things on dressing and then we'll move on. There's a lot of details here. If you are interested in either men's or women's fashion, there's a lot of detail in here that you'll find interesting. um, he says for the upper class, a lot depends on a certain habitual carelessness in the carriage, a quasi windblown, calculated sloppiness. It's almost impossible to imitate, and you should have a long, thin neck also. um, let's see. Then he gets into, he mentions the baseball cap style. I don't know what the generic term for that is, but the cap with the brim, right? Um, he says to achieve even greater ugliness, the Pole will sometimes wear his cap back to front. um, Here we go. So there seems a general agreement, even if often unconscious, that archaism confers class. Thus, the middle class's choice of colonial or Cape Cod houses. Thus, one reason Britain and Europe still, to Americans, have class. Thus, one reason why inheritance and old money are such important class principles, and we covered this in the first episode. The whole issue of how you, what are you living on? Are you living on money you earn or money you inherit? That's a big class distinction. Thus, the practice among top out of sight and upper classes of costuming their servants in some archaic livery, even such survivals as the white apron on the maid or on the butler a striped vest, it's a way of implying that the money goes back a considerable time and that one retains the preferences and habits one learned very long ago. What Veblen, Thorstein Veblen, specified as the leisure class's veneration of the archaic shows itself everywhere in the popularity among the upper middle class of attending opera and classical ballet, of sending its issue to single-sex prep schools, because more unregenerate and old style than co-ed ones, of traveling to view antiquities in Europe and the Middle East, of studying the humanities instead of, say, electrical engineering. Since the humanities involve the past, and studying them usually results in elegiac emotions. Even the study of law has about it this attractive aura of archaism. There's all that dog Latin, and the cases must all be rooted in the past. Classy people never deal with the future. That's for vulgarians like traffic engineers, planners, and inventors. Speaking of the sophisticated TV viewers' love of old black and white films, British critic Peter Conrad comments, style for us is whatever's perished, outmoded, lost. Okay. Since the upper orders possess archaism as their very own class principle, even their devotion to old clothes signals their retrograde sentiment. What can the lower orders do but fly to the new? Not just to sparkling new garments, but to cameras and electronic apparatus and stereo sets and trick watches and electric kitchens and video games. The organic and archaic finally fuse into one classy thing. It is in part because Britain has seen better days that Anglophilia is so indispensable an element in upper class taste in clothes, literature, allusion, manners, and ceremony. Deeply engraved on the American consciousness is the superstition, abundantly visible in the Gothic flourishes of our university architecture, that institutions of the higher learning are the more authentic, the more they allude to their two great British originals. And I really felt that when I first time I visited Cambridge. And I was like, oh, that's what American universities are trying to be. And I could tell how much they were failing because just the feeling of being at Cambridge, you felt the archaicism of it, the oldness of it, I quite liked it, by the way, walking around it briefly at least. The same sense that if it's British, it must have class prompts those who change their names to opt for Anglophilic sounds. No one would change from Pashanitz to Gambarini, but all would change from Horowitz to Howe, Howe. Very interesting observation. Okay, so that's the clothing section. I ripped through it because I'm a little short on time. Now let's talk about the house. When in one of his poems, W.H. Auden indicated that healers were to be found not only in city clinics, but in country houses at the end of drives, he was hardly suggesting that they were proles or even middle class. An acute reader of class signals, he knew that the sort of driveway you have, if any, suggests virtually as much about you as the house it leads to. In general, we can say that the longer the drive, the higher the class, with the proviso that long and curved is grander than long and straight. The reason, as Veblen perceived, is that the curved drive is more futile, taking up more land. The canon of futility, he notes, dictates that the best driveway is a circuitous drive laid across level ground. If the ground weren't level, there might be a utilitarian reason for the curve. As it is, it's pure play and show. Even with the more modest upper middle class driveway, if it goes straight into the garage, it has less class than if it curves. Let's see. Now, the garage. Garages. The upper middle class and middle class house used to act ashamed of its garage, concealing it well in back with other unseemly outbuildings. But now the garage is very much a part of the owner's class presentation, and it's been moved forward on the lot so that passersby can appreciate its two-car size and admire its basketball backboard and hoop, evidence that the house contains at least one member of the leisure class junior grade. The more visible from the street the garage is, the more its costly trick doors can be noted and envied. Three-car and larger garages are seldom seen, not because there aren't any, but because they're part of the invisible residences of the top out-of-sights. Approaching any house, one is bombarded with class signals. The serious student will not panic, but will take them one at a time. The lawn first. Its very existence is an announcement of Anglophilia, England being the place where the lawn came into its own. And literally, at one point, it was a huge, I watch gardening stuff with my wife. So I somehow know the history of lawns. It was a huge class signal at one point because they literally were cutting the lawn with, like, I don't know if it was scissors, but it was really labor intensive to keep the grass cut to a length. Now we have machines, and so it's become less of a class signal than it once was. But it reached, a big, a spacious, big lawn leading up to a nice sized house. It still sends something. You feel something when you see that, right? Neglect of one's lawn in middle class neighborhoods can invite terrible retribution. If you keep an animal to crop your lawn, only the upper class does this, it's essential that it not be something useful in other ways, like a sheep or cow or even a goat, creatures which, as Veblen says, have about them the vulgar suggestion of thrift, but an animal of a more wasteful and exotic kind, like a deer, something not vulgarly lucrative, either in fact or in suggestion, and thus a happy emblem of futility. In cold weather areas, a problem arises for the middle class when the lawn is snow-covered and thus unavailable for invidious display, hence the middle class Christmas light show as a form of compensation. And we have some, I'm sure this is true in other cities, certainly in our city, there are certain houses or certain streets that have become like, it's like a tradition to go visit them because they go so crazy at Christmas with lights. And they become social gathering points. When the front lawn becomes a showcase for permanent objects meant to be admired, we know that we are proceeding down toward the proles. High prole items for lawn exhibition are urns painted blindingly white, as well as front yard trees consisting of some 15 green-painted wrought iron branches, each holding in a ring at the tip a flower pot. Some prole lawn objects are meant to be not just admired, but actually worshipped, like a statue of the Blessed Virgin, which one sees sometimes presented inside an old-fashioned claw-footed bathtub propped upright. A slightly lower kind of class statement is that made by plaster gnomes and flamingos and Disney animals, and by blue or lavender basketball-sized shiny spheres resting on fluted cast concrete pedestals. Proceeding further downward, we're now at about low proletarian. We see things like defunct truck tires painted white with flowers planted inside. At the very class bottom are flower bed enclosures made of rows of dead light bulbs or the butts of disused beer bottles. Down here, another bit of front yard decor will be a rusty supermarket cart, waiting quietly for further employment. Then there's a really fascinating section, which I meant to share with my wife and I forgot, about flowers. Which flowers present upper class and middle class and low class and so forth. But I'm going to skip that. Okay. Okay, so what of the house we are approaching? If it is relatively new, it will be so commonplace and uniform and ugly that ascertaining the exact class of its owner will be difficult. A sarcastic but perhaps not unfair view of it is Russell Lynes's. Today's house, however expensive, has become a box or a series of boxes. Sometimes the box has a sharply peaked roof and is covered with white clapboards, in which case it is called a Cape Cod. If it is a box longer than it is wide and has a gently pitched roof, then it is a ranch house. If it is a square box, it is a bungalow. If it is a two-story box, it is colonial. If it is two boxes sat next to each other, but one a little above the other, then it's a split level. It can be either a split level Cape Cod or a split level ranch. That is the upper middle class and middle class house. The upper class version will be set back farther from the street, but if built in the last 25 years, it will be essentially a little different. The pole model, on the other hand, will be identifiable less because it's smaller than because of the powerboat, trailer, or recreational vehicle exhibited in the driveway. The driveway, of course, will be straight and asphalted. This in addition to the one or more moribund automobiles disposed about the premises. These are most authentic if elevated on concrete blocks. I love it because as you read this, you immediately recognize, you start thinking of neighborhoods and people's houses that you've been to. Anyway, skipping around a bit, he goes into the house. In the upper class living room, there may be exquisite homemade petit point chair seats or a brick doorstop covered in needlepoint. These suggest yards and yards of leisure on the part of the lady of the house. In general, the more allusions to European architectural decor, the higher the class. Black and white marble entryways, balustrades and railings, brocaded wall coverings, brass door fittings, which imply daily polishing by someone, certainly not the owner, all confer the air both of archaism and the un-American, so essential for upper class status. So the American upper class is constantly pretending that they're like really in Europe or something, I guess. If the living rooms of the top classes tend to ape art galleries and museums, those of the middle class and below resemble motel rooms. Socially crucial is the dividing line where original works of art or virtu are replaced by reproductions. In the middle class, the floor will be carpeted wall to wall. Upper class would tend to prefer a hardwood floor with a oriental rug in the middle or something, right? Where you see part of the hardwood floor. The floor will be carpeted wall to wall. There will be Venetian blinds made not of wood but of metal with the slats curved. If potted plants are displayed, there may be cactuses among them. I love the detail. The most notable characteristic of middle-class decor is the flight from any sort of statement that might be interpreted as controversial or ideologically pointed. One can't be too careful. Pictures, for example, safe are sailing vessels, small children and animals, and pastoral scenes, unlike images that hint any ideological import like France, Civil War, New York City, or East European immigration. Argument or even disagreement must be avoided at all costs. In aid of this high-minded end, benign mottos and signs are useful, like the favorite which reads, "Great Spirit, grant that I may not criticize my neighbor until I have walked a mile in his moccasins." um, One reason for the absence of character in middle-class decorating is that the women get their ideas from national magazines and assume, as one woman told Lines, that if you've seen something in a magazine, well, people will nearly always like it. Hence the brass skillet hung against the brick wall, the colonial wallpaper, etc. And it's true, too, that much of this characterlessness can be imputed to the frequency with which the middle class is moved from suburb to suburb by the corporations which employ it. What works in one house must work in the next. As one middle-class wife told Vance Packard, "I settle for something that will move well." I've skipped over it a bit, but well, maybe in the first episode, he emphasizes how the middle class is just completely the creature of the corporation. You know, the corporation says move, the middle class guy moves, right? So, to change a middle class living room to a prole one, you'd add a Naugahyde Barca lounger. There's some dated stuff in here. And reinvite ideology back into the pictures. But the ideology would be the sort conveyed in the popular chromo Christ at the United Nations. Thick, transparent plastic would cover the upholstery. Fringe would appear around the bottom of the sofa. And little woolly balls would dangle from the lampshades, which might be tied with large bows. These things would satisfy the prole hunger for, as decorators put it, lots of goop. The dining table would be of metal and formica, and somewhere a bowling ball carrier might be visible. An observer with little time to spend in a house can make a fair estimate of the class of the occupants by noting the position of the TV set. The principle is that the higher in class you are, the less likely it is that your TV will be exhibited in your living room. Openly and proudly, that is. If you want it there for convenience, or because there's no other place to put it, you'll drain away some of its nastiness by an active parody display, indicating that you're not taking the TV at all seriously by using the top as a shelf for ridiculous objects like hideous statuettes, absurd souvenirs, hilariously awful wedding presents, and the like. This is assuming you have a TV at all. The upper class tends not to. In a recent book of 100 photographs of upper class people in their houses in Lake Forest, Illinois, only one TV set is to be seen. TV is distinctly, as one industry spokesman said recently, not a patrician medium. And it's a startling fact that there are upper-class people who've never heard of Lucy or the Muppets. For those young people, Lucy would be Lucy from I Love Lucy, I believe. Often in highbrow households, the TV set will be found snugly lodged in a wall of bookshelves, as if proximity could make an ersatz literary object of it. The further down socially you proceed, the more likely that the TV set will be on all the time. In fact, if you're in the presence of one or more sets that are seldom dark, you're either a proletarian, someone who works in the TV or news industry, someone who does PR for the President of the United States, or a person who runs an appliance store. Among mid and low proles, the set will probably be found in the dining room or kitchen, wherever the family gathers for meals. This allows the TV to replace conversation entirely, which is why these classes depend upon it. And then he gets into the different things people watch. He's referring to TV shows that, unless you're as old as me, you're not going to know what he's talking about. But let me jump to this. The more violent the body contact of the sports you watch, the lower your class. Tennis and golf, and even bowling, are classier to watch than boxing, hockey, and pro football. The lower proles will watch any of this stuff on occasion, because as long as the set's on and playing, they're moderately satisfied, pleased with the subliminal message their TV's always conveying. I am owned by a family that can afford a color TV. Science and technology have never quite made it socially. Whatever Sebastian Flight was studying at Oxford and Brideshead Revisited, it wasn't chemistry, partly, I suppose, because excitement over them and the illusion of progress they propose is a prole characteristic. And he mentions this in the context of, you guys might know these shows, mid and low proles liking to watch sitcoms based either on outright magic like The Flying Nun or on some technological marvel like The Hulk, The Bionic Woman, or The $6 Million Man. I did grow up watching The Hulk, The Bionic Woman, The $6 Million Man when I was young, I must mention. Proles like TV commercials. They'll use phrases from TV commercials regularly. Okay, then that's the living room and its main giveaway piece of furniture, the TV. Now the kitchen. The upper class kitchen, designed to be entered only by servants, is identifiable at once. It's beat up, inconvenient, and out of date. With lots of wood, no formica whatever, and a minimum of accessories and labor-saving appliances like dishwashers and garbage disposals. Why tolerate these noisy things when you can have a silent servant do precisely what they do? The upper-class kitchen does have a refrigerator, but so antique that it has rounded corners and a big white coil on top. Neatness and modernity enter as we move down toward the middle class, and the more your kitchen resembles a lab, the worse for you socially. That is a great observation. What is it, the zero temp? What do they call them? The zero temp fridges with the metal front. Anyway, an electric stove has less class than a gas one. The appearance of modernity and efficiency here is everywhere, severely compromising one's status presentation. The tech kitchen, with lots of microwave and toaster ovens and coffee makers, is socially as fatal as the TV set whose control panel suggests a youth misspent at a technical institute. Let's see, I'll skip the bathroom, I think. Animals. In domestic settings, whether upper or prole, domestic animals are bound to be in attendance, and like everything else, they give off class signals. Let's start with dogs. They're classier the more they allude to non-utilitarian hunting, and thus to England. Top dogs, consequently, are Labradors, Golden Retrievers, Corgis, King Charles Spaniels, and Afghan Hounds. To be upper class, you should have a lot of them, and they should be named after the costlier liquors like brandy and whiskey. The middle class goes in for Scotties and Irish setters, often giving them Scottish or Irish names. Proles, for their part, like breeds that can be conceived to furnish protection. Doberman Pinschers, German Shepherds, and I know you all saw this coming, pit bulls, as the internet frequently discusses. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting from Rousseau. This is a conversation between Jean-Jacques Rousseau and James Boswell about dogs versus cats. Rousseau says, "Do you like cats?" Boswell says, "No." Rousseau says, "I was sure of that. It is my test of character. There you have the despotic instinct of men. They do not like cats because the cat is free, and he will never consent to become a slave. He will do nothing to your order, as the other animals do. Thus the upper order's fondness for a species they can order about, like their caterers, gardeners, and lawyers, and one that fawns the more it's commanded. Sit. That's a good boy." So notice he pokes at everybody, right? The upper classes for wanting servility, to be surrounded by servility. Lots of good comments. I will have to catch up. Okay, I'm doing okay. I did want to get into this lengthy final chapter I was going to try to cover for today. I'm inclined to continue the series and maybe one more show to finish the book because I'm just loving this stuff. I'm sharing 5% of what's so great in this book. I'm just throwing some highlights, enough to kind of give you some themes and hopefully just to make you long to buy this. Name of the book and the author on the screen. Okay, final chapter I'll cover for today is Consumption, Recreation, and Bibelots, spelled Bibelots. Had to look it up. I didn't know what it meant. Okay. I'm going to read this opening lengthy paragraph in full. I read it to my wife last night because I just thought it was so delightful and funny. There's hardly a richer single occasion for class revelation than the cocktail hour, since the choice of any drink and the amount consumed resonates with status meaning. For example, if you are a middle-aged person and you ask for white wine, the sweeter it is, by the way, the lower class your host and hostess, you are giving off a very specific signal, identifying yourself as upper or upper middle class. You're saying that, of course, you used to booze a lot on expensive hard liquor, a habit mastered at a socially okay college, but that now, having been brought to the brink of alcoholism by your attractive excesses, you are bright enough to shift your style in midlife and drink something milder. The reputation of dry white wine as the lowest calorically of drinks also recommends it to the thin obsessed. So many classy people have now foregone hard liquor that there's a whole new large group of upper and upper middle class white wine drunks who, because they are seen to be knocking back only something light and sensible, hope that their swangs and stammerings will pass unnoticed. One of their favorite tipples is Italian Suave, Soave, I may be saying that wrong, which is cheap, readily available, and pronounceable, while remaining foreign enough to qualify as a conspicuous import and thus a high-class item. Frascati is another favorite, asking for Perrier, upper, or club soda, middle, while others are consuming alcohol, delivers a message similar to asking for white wine. It says, I am grand and desirable for two reasons. First, I used to drink heavily, and thus formerly was funny, careless, adventuresome, etc. And second, I had the sense to give it up, and am thus both intelligent and disciplined. Further, I am at the moment your social superior, because sober I'm watching you get drunk, and I can assure you that you are a pathetic spectacle. What delightful writing. Okay, right. So, in addition to white wine and carbonated water, other top-class drinks are vodka, especially mixed with water only. Having it with tonic is a bit middle class. Bloody Marys, but never after 3 p.m. And scotch, especially on the rocks or with a tiny bit of water. That's the right way to do it, tiny bit of water. Anyway, sorry, I'm a whiskey guy. Putting soda in scotch is thought rather coarse. Anglophilia determines that scotch is higher than bourbon, preeminently the tipple of the middle class, of bourbon that is. That class also provides the main body of martini enthusiasts. If you drink martinis after dinner, you are a prole. Beer is college boy, and an acute student of this subject should be able to infer fairly accurately the class of your college by observing whether you drink Molson's, Beck's, Heineken's, or Grolsch on the one hand, or Bud, Michelob, Stroh's, Peels, or Schlitz on the other. A distinction hinted at by Dwight MacDonald when he observed, commenting on the world envisaged by John O'Hara, that a Yale man gets drunk in a wholly different way from a Penn State man. What remember what's the meme? What kind of American are you? Yeah. What kind of drinker are you? This distinction is also a way of recognizing that all else being equal, bottles are classier than cans. The principle of archaism. Again, cans are newer, right? Bottles are classic. The middle class can be recognized by its propensity to hide the liquor in the kitchen, whence emerge the drinks slowly and grudgingly. If bottles are visible, they'll most likely be class brands like Old Grandad and Tanqueray, Tanqueray being a useful Anglophilic gesture. Uppers, not requiring the internal morale support provided by brand names, serve cheap house brands with no apology. They are also likely to serve drinks in throwaway plastic glasses, the alcohol, not the accessories, being the important thing. Among the upper middle class, on the other hand, so he's going from top out of sight and upper to upper middle, your drink will come in an outsized old-fashioned glass imprinted in color with ducks or setters or sloops. The middle class is likely to serve drinks in pink goblets, cut or rather pressed in busy patterns. High proles will use what used to be called juice glasses. You get them at the hardware dime store, and they're decorated with oranges, strawberries, piglets, or little girls wearing sunbonnets. Jelly and peanut butter jars with the labels soaked off are the glassware of mid and low proles. But the ultimate class bifurcation based on drink is simpler than that, and it cuts straight across the center of society, unmistakably dividing the top classes from the bottom. I'm speaking about the difference between dry and sweet. If the locution a 7 and 7 is strange to you, if your nose wrinkles a bit at the idea of drinking a shot of Seagram 7 Crown mixed with 7-Up, you are safely at or near the top, or at least not deeply compromised by the sugar fixation of the bottom. My damned sweet tooth is holding me back socially. Though I don't think I would drink that actually. Bourbon and ginger is another drink favored down there, but virtually unknown higher up. To a startling degree, Prole America is about sweet. According to the Roper poll, 40% of Americans, most of them proles of course, consume at least one cola or similar drink every day, and proles will hardly touch bread unless it has sugar or honey in it. Things seem to grow worse in the Middle West, where at bars, brandy often outsells whiskey, and dry wine is very hard to come by. Actually, you could probably draw a trustworthy class line based wholly on the amount of sugar consumed by a family, making allowance for the number of children in the household. Sweet alcoholic drinks are favored by the young and callow of all classes. This is a little dark. There seems something significant in the testimony of the girlfriend of Trent Lehman, the former child TV drama star who hanged himself. He started to drink heavily, Seagrams and 7-Up, she reports. One day he was sitting in the jacuzzi with all his clothes on, drunk. How like a boy, a man would have been drunk on dry white wine. Very dark. Thus, when we see the TV ad commending a cracker because it's made with a touch of honey, we know that either adult proles or kiddies of all classes are the audience being solicited. Let's see. Okay, yeah, now moving on to dining. So he's talking about some books addressed to the upper middle class, and he says their common emphasis was on elegance. When you give a dinner party for friends, the minute they sit at the table, they cease to be friends, or even equals. They become an audience. And it's now your obligation to impress them with the grandeur or sophistication of the arrangements and the cuisine, and thus establish your class superiority. Johnson infers from all this, harping on elegance, that the social divisions in American life seem to be widening. And not only that, class anxiety seems to be increasing as well. Here, eating is not the thing, Johnson infers from these books. These glossy and expensive volumes announce anxiety, fear that the status of the host may not really be securely anchored, anxiety lest it come further unfixed by negligent management of the table and the food. So having guests for dinner becomes a big nervous deal, right? Thus, the presence of plenty of candles, flowers, costly linens, silver candelabra, and salt and pepper shakers, or better, salt in little silver dishes with midget spoons alongside. We have some of those. Thus also the deployment of a multitude of superfluous wine accessories, a basket for the bottle to repose in, even though it's from the local liquor store and contains a pasteurized liquid that will not throw a sediment in 100 years, a silver pouring spout to insert in the neck of the bottle, lest a drop of the valuable vintage be lost, trick silver-plated corkscrews, silver bottom cozies and lacy patterns, and silver coasters to set the wine glasses on. Now, the timing of when you eat is a class indication. You can see how this could drive you crazy, and why I started with the scripture, and I'll end with scripture as well. You can see how this drives you crazy. This could drive you crazy because as you read through this book, as fun as it is, suddenly it's like, wow, we're having dinner a little early. That's not very classy, you know. Just every detail of life is infused with these class indicators. It's crazy making. Anyway, so this would all be deployed on the table for upper classes at around 8 p.m. The time at which the evening meal is eaten being a remarkably trustworthy indication of class, actual or hoped for. Destitutes and bottom out of sights eat dinner at 5:30. For the prole staff, which takes care of them, wants to clean up and be out roller skating or bowling early in the evening. That class then eats thus at 6 or 6:30. The prole dinner can be identified not just by the time it takes place, but by the time it takes to eat it. Like 8 minutes from start to finish, from canned grapefruit to instant Senka with sugar in it. Because the prole dinner is not an occasion for conversational speculation or commentary or fantasy, it can go very rapidly. It's a mere nutritional operation. And the lower your class, the more likely that your dinner table life will take place all year long with relatives only. This is probably less the result of poverty than fear of committing class solecisms. Unless you're class secure, you stay within what sociologists call the kin network. Excuse me, I'm not drinking because I'm holding a book in my hand. Excuse me. Dining by candlelight and other archaistic devices for prolonging the time spent at table are left to the middle classes and above. Candles, after all, make little sense if you're eating in full daylight. The middle class eats at 7 or even 7:30. The upper middle at 8 or 8:30. Some upper middles, uppers, and top out of sides dine at 9 o'clock or even later, 9 p.m. or even later, after nightly protracted cocktail sessions lasting at least 2 hours. Sounds good to me. Anyway, sometimes they forget to eat at all. You can identify the nouveau riche by their practice of drinking until 10 o'clock, eating until 1:30, and dismissing the cleaner-ups at 3 o'clock. He says more decent and considerate upper-class people eat around 8 or close to that hour, being thoughtful enough not to require the staff to stay up till all hours afterward. So they eat later, but if they eat really later, they're not being considerate. They have poor etiquette with their staff, which is the mark of the nouveau riche. At the very top, the food is usually not very good, tending, like the conversation, to a terrible blandness, a sad lack of originality and cutting edge. Gestures towards exoticism, that is, the foreign, enter when we move down to the upper middle class. Among upper middles, there's a general belief that sliced bread is ipso facto horrible. Abroad is the magic notion at the upper middle. Sometimes it seems that anything will be consumed so long as it's not native. Thus the parade of pâtés, unpasteurized cheese and wine, morels, escargots, pasta, and moussaka. But some lines are drawn. Tacos and pizza are out, and so are common Chinese dishes. Down in the middle and prole worlds, on the other hand, the thing to drink with the evening meal is likely to be either some sort of soda, or among proles, beer, almost always in the can. The middle-class fear of ideology we noticed in their home decor has its counterpart in their flight from sharp flavors in food. This is where meals are fashioned out of the bland and the soft and the blah, and where the very mention of garlic causes the eyeballs to roll back. Even onions are used sparingly, and canned fruits or fruit cocktail are preferred to the real thing, both because they are sweeter and because they are more tasteless. Purveyors of food to the middle class have learned from disillusioning but profitable experience that to designate anything mild, like cheese or mustard, is to increase volume, while to say nothing or go so far as to label it strong or spicy is risky. Spicy effects return near the bottom of the status ladder, where ethnic items begin to appear. Polish sausage, hot pickles, and the like. This is the main reason the middle class abjures such tastes, believing them associated with low people, non-Anglo-Saxon foreigners, recent immigrants, and such riffraff, who can almost always be identified by their fondness for unambiguous and ungenteel flavors. Oh, this one hits hard. This is right in the heart of our family here. Ice cream, at once both sweet and soft, is the favorite middle-class treat. And the very kind of ice cream you like has class meaning. Vanilla's at the top, chocolate considerably lower, strawberry and other fruit flavors near the bottom. Oh, I'm skipping a lot of the fun, colorful details. I'll throw one in. When Arthur Penn, maker of the film Bonnie and Clyde, wanted to stigmatize that gang as a bunch of bad proles, he had them send out for peach ice cream. Ugh. Where you buy your food. The uppers and some of the upper middles phone their orders in and have things delivered by a nice man who says good morning and puts the perishables away in your refrigerator. The lesser upper middles and the middles hump their own stuff home from the A&P. The proles shop at the Acme or the food fair, distinguished from the A&P by slightly lower prices, a lesser grade of meat, and most important, the absence on the shelves of anything exotic or frightening or even foreign. One reason top people like to give phone orders for food is that they like being bossy And it's fun also to show off by pronouncing properly the names of imported items like uncommon cheeses. He talks a bit about eating out. I won't go into depth on this, but he says eating out is a fixation with both middles and proletarians. Gives you a chance to play king and queen for a day, issuing orders, being waited on, affecting to be somebody. By frequenting a restaurant said to put out gourmet food, the middle class can play the game it loves most, pretending to be in the class above. Yeah, I'm going to skip more details on eating out. Let's see. Oh, okay. No, this is good. From the prole restaurant. The prole restaurant will at least be unpretentious. No flambe there. No fraudulent French accents or flagrant misspellings of the French on the menu. The help in such places are really just folks like you, and you get into long, intensely friendly conversations with them. How's your mother's sciatica, dear? On both sides, there's a strong desire to be liked rather than admired, and an ambition not by any means to be thought hoity-toity. Let's see. He talks about the class meaning of a traditional social event held in January. I refer to the Super Bowl party, a fixture found among the middle class, to be sure, but which comes wholly into its own among proles. And he goes on at length about the Super Bowl party. Now, so other practices which broadcast your class division are your practices in weekending, summering, and traveling, as well as your preferences in sports, both play it yourself and spectating. As a class concept, I didn't know this, the weekend has suffered a sad come down in proletarianization in the last 100 years. The term dates only from 1878. We didn't have a weekend before 1878. A moment marking what can be said to be the flowering of high bourgeois culture. Then, weekend could connote overnight stays at splendid houses in the country. But now, that sort of grandeur, aped once by the upper and upper middle classes here, the concept weekend has taken on largely middle class or high prole associations, betokening now the momentary freedom custom and the law oblige employers to grant their wage slaves. It's true. I am a wage slave. Anyway, I work for the man, and I'm okay with it. It should hardly be necessary to indicate that for uppers who do not have employers or perform steady work, the weekend is not a very meaningful concept, except as it indicates the days when the banks are closed. If weekend is essentially a prole because an employee's notion, summering is upper middle class and higher. The summer is the high point of the prep year, the point of reference for everything else in life. You choose your clothing, car, friends, pets on the basis of where and how you summer. The Jeep because you summer on rough terrain. The sailboat motif because you sail during the summer. Proles, on the other hand, prole summer is never 3 months long, but 2 weeks or at most 4. They summer at an attraction specially built for them, like the Disney Fun Park, which they will, in a sense, rent while there and then relinquish. On the prole principle that the public knows what's best, the prole will always go where others go, preferably to stand in line once he's there. I hate that. I hate going to places where I'm staying in line half the day. Okay, now, travel, or he says it'd be better to call the activity tourism. All classes are the victims of tourism. But proles least of all, not so much because they can't afford it, as because they fear the new experiences they imagine it might offer. The touristic class is predominantly the middle class, the one that has made Hawaii, as Roger Price unkindly designates it, Rube Valhalla. I'm just going to take a drink while you sit with Hawaii as Rube Valhalla. Amazing phrase. The middle is the class that makes cruise ships a profitable enterprise, for it fancies that the upper middle class is to be mixed with on them. And as we now know, we have the aging and dying boomers spending their final bits of money on cruise ships as they, make an effort to leave absolutely zero to the next generations. Tourism is popular with the middle class because it allows them to buy the feeling, as C. Wright Mills says, if only for a short time, of higher status. For what the middle class most envies in the classes above is their trips abroad, more than their houses, cars, or other items of local conspicuous consumption. Cultural superiority is symbolized by the upper's experiences of distant places, and the upper's habit of tripping seems to say that the traveler is already comfortable in such settings or is in the process of becoming so. Did I already share this on the show? Maybe. Sorry if I'm repeating, but while we're on the topic, I remember going on a work trip to China. It wasn't my first time in Asia. I'd been to Hong Kong a couple times, but it was my first time in Beijing, and I had brought someone, a coworker, with me for the trip. And we got there, and we weren't going to see our coworkers till the morning, Sunday evening. We got there Sunday evening. I needed to get my neck shaved because I didn't get my neck shaved when I got my haircut, and we needed dinner. So, no car or anything in the middle of Beijing, and I said, okay, let's go do it. Found a barber with no common language between us. Finally got them to understand what I needed. They took care of me. I paid them. Then we went to a restaurant where we're the only white people there, ordered food, and we're eating our meal. And my friend says, "You're good at traveling." So I guess that's what he's talking about here, traveling skills. The upper class usually tours independently without joining a group. Hey, and now sports. Class accrues also, of course, from participation and even interest in sports. Not all sports, only certain carefully selected ones. And he talks about ties, and ties that have symbols of sports on them. If you want to be sort of upwardly mobile, you want to have a little fish with a fly in its mouth on your tie, a tennis racket, a sailboat, a golf ball or golf club, a horse or a polo bat. Tennis has suffered a bit in class since the proliferation of free municipal courts, but still at its best, it requires a handsome and expensive costume, equipment, and lessons, and thus qualifies as an upper middle class enterprise at least. Knowing how to sail a boat well is so indispensable to upper middle class status that it can almost serve as a class division in itself. Do you even sail, bro? Golf is slipping a bit now as a high status sport. Today you can even overhear high polls discussing their games, but it still generally fulfills the requirements set down by Allison Leary. A high status sport, by definition, is one that requires a great deal of expensive equipment or an expensive setting or both. Ideally, it will use up goods and services rapidly. Golf, for instance, demands the withdrawal from cultivation, housing, or commercial use of many acres of valuable land. The resulting golf course must be constantly weeded, watered, mown, and rolled with high-cost machines. Although skiing has now sunk to middle-class status and even below, it began as a class sport because it was expensive, inconvenient, and practiced only in distant places. And dangerous, which meant that it was one of the sources, like today's snowmobiles and mopeds, outdated comment there, of the white badge of honor. Ready? The white badge of honor. The plaster cast on leg or ankle worn during the winter by members of the 3 top classes. This white badge signifies a high degree of conspicuous waste in a social world where questions of unpayable medical bills or missed working days do not apply. One can also earn the white badge from mishaps with horses, if you're lucky, right? Riding is a class sport, not just because, like yachting, it's expensive, but because it's so archaic, horse riding. It also permits you to look down on people. Does he mean literally? Because you're up on a horse? Maybe so. Lisa Birnbach has come up with a fairly sound formula for estimating the class of games played in school and college. The balls used in top class games are generally smaller than those used in the others. Thus, the superiority of golf, tennis, and squash to football, basketball, volleyball, and baseball, and of course, bowling. Because it's the most expensive, yachting beats all other recreations as a theater for upper status exhibition. Houseboats are at the class bottom, like trailers. failing on at least 3 counts. If movable, they're moved by power, not sail. They're comfortable boats with lots of room, and one lives in them. So we don't want the houseboat if we're going to be hoity-toity. He talks about yachts being made out of wood being better than yachts made out of like fiberglass. Indoor games. Bridge and, of course, backgammon are quite high class. Scrabble is middle class, like canasta. Chess is seldom found above the upper middle class. It's too hard. If the upper orders have yachts, what do proles have? Bowling. If you want to maintain upper status, it's important that you never go bowling. Bowling is popular with proles for many reasons. For one thing, you can drink and smoke while doing it. For another, if you get on a company team, you wear a nifty uniform shirt made of satin with your own name machine embroidered in script above one pocket. Bowling remains the classic prole sport, and proles can't get too much of it. This is particularly funny for me because we literally have a bowling party for my workplace. They decided that would be sort of the campus event. We're going to go to a local bowling alley, rent out the whole place, and bowl together. So hopefully no one will see me doing this, right? Lest I fall in class. Okay, now the class meaning of sports fanship and spectatorhood. Short of watching such Anglophile exercises as cricket and polo, which is hard to do in the US, the most class probably attaches to watching tennis. Watching golf is good too. So is watching the America's Cup race at Newport, Rhode Island. Watching them all live, meaning actually being there, is of course better than watching them on TV because it takes conspicuous expenditure to get there. On television, below golf comes baseball, and below that football, then ice hockey, then boxing, stock car racing, bowling, and at the bottom, so far down that it's gone now, roller derby. Roller derby, once popular with advertisers until they discovered that the people watching it were so low prole or even destitute that they constituted an entirely wasted audience for the commercials. They couldn't buy anything at all, not even detergents, antacids, and beer. Low reach undesirables. The roller derby audience became known in the trade, and the event that attracted them was soon removed from television. Oh, there was a comment I didn't want to lose. There's a way to like star a comment, right? Pin message, yeah, okay. Sorry. Shoot. Not finding it. Okay, I'll find it. It was a great comment. I wanted to make sure to share with everyone. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up quick. So, 2 motives urge middle-class and prole fans to obsession with their sports. One is their need as losers to identify with winners, the need to dance and scream "We're number one" while holding an index finger erect. One hockey player says, "The whole object of a pro game is to win. That is what we sell. We sell it to a lot of people who don't win at all in their regular lives. They involve themselves with their team, a winning team." In addition to this appeal through vicarious success, sports are popular for middles and proles to follow because they sanction a flux of pedantry, dogmatism, record-keeping, wise secret knowledge, and pseudo-scholarship of the sort usually associated with the decision-making or executive or opinion-molding classes. The World Series and the Super Bowl constitute harmless twice-yearly opportunities, occurring oddly near the winter and summer solstices, as if designed by nature herself, for the plain man to garner some self-respect. If the prole doesn't know what might cause Union Carbide to go up or down, as a master of the fine points of the game, he can affect to know why the Chargers or the Dodgers are going to win this time, and that's a powerful need satisfied. Exercising authority in learned matters like these is one way the middle and prole classes assert their value. Another way is buying things, especially from mail order catalogs. Now, he goes into great detail about what people order. Obviously, now we just get stuff from Amazon, but a few bits of comment on purchasing, and then we will stop and I'll read a few chats. De Tocqueville, 1845. He says, "Among democratic nations, ambition is ardent and continual, but its aim is not habitually lofty, and life is generally spent in eagerly coveting small objects that are within reach." He means goals, of course, but his formulation works just as well if you think of chrome-plated ice tongs, Hummel figurines, and imitation silver bookmarks reading Dan Burris, his book. Anyway, he goes on and on about what the various classes order. Um, let's see. For the middle class with upward longings, the great class totem is Mother England. Many catalogs get down to the Anglophilic job right at the beginning by displaying the Union Jack on the cover. One announces we are unabashedly Anglophiles, and then goes on to associate Britain with strictly organic materials like wool and leather. From this company, you can buy a cavalry saber and a matching copy of Churchill's My Early Life. I guess the cavalry saber and the book actually match in some sense. Interesting. Let's see. Right. The top classes, looking at their catalogs, know what they want in their bibelots. Expensive throwaways, largely things to give people who already have everything. You can order from these upper catalogs. You can order a silver ice cream cone holder, silver candle snuffers, trick corkscrews, gold or silver collar stays, which they're not even going to use because they tend to wear Oxford cloth button downs. And other sort of silly things, basically. So if the middle class buys for its morale and the upper for laugh, proles buy to pay their respects to technology and art. Space scientific electronic watches. Again, some outdated stuff here. Cameras, the more complex, the better. Artistic items, a porcelain egg with nativity scene in bas relief, a musical gondola, beautifully designed and elaborately embossed brass. Gondola revolves on pedestal base to O Solo Mio. Hinged treasure box opens to reveal elegant red velvet interior. This one hit me as an Austrian economist. One thing notable about current prole catalogs is the virtual disappearance of novelty banks, the kind that, before inflation, made saving a cruel joke. You used to insert coins into to save for your education or for taking a wonderful trip someday. I'm reminded of the searing comment by Tom Woods, who said there was a time when regular people could literally, stuff money under the mattress, and that money would become more valuable as the, gains of a more efficient economy made your money buy more. Well, now that person is forced to participate in the stock market and more risky behavior. Otherwise, their money just loses value because of inflation. So, in the Fed. See, anything else I want to highlight here? He talks a lot about middle classes liking to have their own names on things, getting things that are personalized, monogrammed with their initials and so forth. He says, no matter what class exhibits them, monogram suggests some doubt about one's importance, some need to impress an audience. If you're securely upper middle class, your name should appear nowhere but on checks and typed underneath illegible signatures. And then I'll just end with his final paragraph and we'll do comments. If personalizing isn't absolutely indispensable to Americans, buying things from catalogs seems to be, not because they want the thing, but because they need to exercise the illusion of choice by buying them. Catalog buying delivers the illusion of power without the social risk of encounters with others who might dispute your power. The act of ordering unnecessary objects by mail is a new secret way of performing what Veblen calls the conspicuously wasteful honorific expenditure that confers spiritual well-being. In certain moods, when we wonder what we're about and what we're worth, we all resemble Billy Pilgrim's mother. Like so many Americans, says Kurt Vonnegut, she was trying to construct a life that made sense from things she found in gift shops. I always remember that quote. It's probably underlined in my copy of that Vonnegut book. Okay, let's wrap up quickly. I'll see if we have any tips on Subscribestar, super chats on YouTube. I don't think so. Okay, so I'm just going to look over the chat. I know there was at least one thing I really wanted to highlight. Cap says, are these classes primarily economic or also cultural? Both, as explained in the last show. Or it just doesn't map so neatly to like economic things. You can be upper class and broke, but still be upper class in so many other indicators, you know, how you dress, how you carry yourself, and so forth. Yeah, Caravaggio says, English aristocrats have a very particular physiognomy even today. I agree. I've noticed. Let's see. Someone liked my story about ironing jeans. Oh, FBI informant says, and where do yoga pants come into this? Yeah, good question. I'm wondering if the upper class women are wearing the yoga pants. Caravaggio says, nobody does casual countryside attire like the English. And he says, barber jacket supremacy. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Don Browning says, Americans kept good manners more than the Brits did. That's interesting. And Ethel Wolf points out our very own Donald J. Trump is a teetotaler. So that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know that Trump has indicators of upper class other than his teetotaling. Yeah, Sonny Jim says lawns were to show off that you owned land that you didn't need to cultivate. Very good point. Not only was there the expense of maintaining the lawn, but that was land that you weren't putting to use to grow food. So conspicuous consumption back then. Let's see. Yes. Oh, speaking of cocktail hour, D is launching his channel. That's coming up in a couple hours. They're going to be talking about Twin Peaks: The Return, the sort of sequel series to the original Twin Peaks, which I've never seen, so I'm kind of afraid to listen to it as much as I want to hear them discuss it. Let's see. Last statue. Thank you for this comment. You can get the other side of this in Mrs. Fussell, so his wife, I suppose, Betty Fusel's book, My Kitchen Wars. I'm going to look that up. Thank you for the tip. I didn't know about it. Let's see. Sonny Jim says golf started slipping as a high standard sport since women were allowed to join golf clubs. Sonny Jim says tin pin bowling is prole. Crown green bowling is still middle class. Interesting. The show Columbo. Yeah, Columbo was full of these high class signifiers. I do remember that. The people he was going after were often upper middle upper types. Sonny Jim says yes. The number of people he investigated who kept their spirits in decanters was notable, for example. Let's see, I think I've caught up. Okay, otherwise just other chat. Okay, thanks for the comments, really good. Hope you found this interesting. I thought this was such fascinating material. Once again, I do want to end with the scripture from Paul the Apostle, in case this stuff started getting you feeling very self-conscious about your class and your habits and the clothes you wear and just all kinds of craziness. Paul wrote, I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Or to put it in my own words, our validation should come from God and not from, people being impressed with our social class indicators or whatever. Our ultimate validation, right? Should be steady and calm based on the rock that is Christ. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was great fun. I think I will keep doing it. I don't know how many people are watching. I guess I never look at the numbers. I don't worry about it. I just do what I want to do. So I will probably continue the series. Probably I won't be here next week, as I mentioned at the top, because of work. Probably after that, we'll try to get Black Horse on for another Econ Minis. So I will finish this series probably with one more show. I'll try to sweep through the rest of the book with one more show. But it is, just to give a teaser, there's some stuff I'm probably going to want to cover. The very next chapter after the one I stopped at is the life of the mind. So I'm really interested in that. And then he talks, another chapter coming up is climbing and sinking and pole drift. So talking about movement between classes. That'll be interesting as well and hook up with the show that Black Horse and I did. I made a playlist. This is now the third video in it. I've got the one that Black Horse and I did together about how people are able to move class financially, economically. You know, what steps they have to take and skills they have to learn to like move up from destitute to lower class, and from prole to middle class, and from middle to upper, and so forth. He goes through each of those transitions. It's excellent. He's thought a lot about it, knows a lot about it, knows a lot of people at all of those stages. Really recommend it if you find this interesting. And then, of course, the first episode of covering this book is simply called Class. Please note the thumbnails that my graphic designer and I came up with for the class episode and this episode. I'm quite pleased with them. Okay, that's it. See you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the chat. Great comments, especially the tip about his wife's book, Kitchen Wars. I'm looking that up right away. Okay, thank you. What do I do to finish? Here we go.